Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for perhaps your second time today. I'm one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts who is not more Noor Kyle, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us once again within the Nine-Sided Circle. We had our once monthly other talk for us this morning, and you can join us next month if 10:30 a.m. Pacific time on a Sunday is a better time for you. We have that time specifically so that people who can't join us, as many do now at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time every Sunday, you get to have a chance to join us too. So that is, like I said, every third Sunday of each month that we do our other talk so that more people can join in. All right, so a little bit of the usual YouTube spiel. You can help us out greatly by, if you enjoy this video, liking this video, letting us know, and subscribing to our channel, keeping track of all the videos that we post, and keeping up with the conversation via our comment section. You can respond to each other's comments even. We appreciate any and all, contributive engagement. It means a lot to us. You can join us on Facebook, on our Facebook group, if you want to engage with us that way. And that'll also give you the opportunity to join us live on these calls, which is also possible via our mailing list. So you have either of those options. And for those of you who would love to contribute with helping us pay for all of the stuff that we do behind the scenes in order to keep this free for you, you can donate to our PayPal or subscribe to our Ko-fi. The links to those are also in our description below. All of that stuff is. Anything I'm missing, Mushtaq?
Yeah, that if you can't donate, we still like you.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes just having you here, knowing that you're here, and appreciating the work that we do, that is absolutely really uplifting for us. It keeps us motivated.
Yeah,
So,
there have been times where somebody has not had money and really needed to work with us that we have said, okay, go feed 3 hungry people, and that's your fee. And that works really well too. So we're flexible.
yep. All right, so let's dive into our topic this evening.
All right,
So,
what is our topic this evening?
we're going to be talking about the third force of the infamous three forces that often get talked about within the work of Gurdjieff and other milieu in which we talk about there being three fundamental forces in the universe instead of just two. So we're challenging the binary that tends to be so common in many of the metaphysical worldviews that are discussed these days. Where should we begin, Mushtaq?
Well, let's talk about the three forces.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is familiar with the first two forces. They call them Gurdjieff originally called them wholly affirming, wholly denying, and wholly reconciling, or the active force, the passive force, and the reconciling force, or the yes, the no, and the maybe, or a million other different names. They are ubiquitous in the world. Um, the example that I like to use and has always worked for me is that of an atom. So the bang goes big. The universe is created. And the first element that is created in the universe is hydrogen. Hydrogen consists of one electron and one proton. Now, if you remember your high school science class, you know that like charges repel. So with an electron and a proton, you have opposite charges. If the two particles were standing still, they would be drawn together. They would go clack or something like that. I don't know what atomic particles make by way of sound, but we'll say it's clack. But the spin on the electrons keep them separated. Now, the next element in the periodic table is hydrogen.
Helium.
Helium, excuse me. Thank you. There's Todd to keep me honest on these things. Helium has 4 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 protons, and 2 of these things called neutrons. Now, if you had 2 protons by themselves sitting in a nucleus of an atom, they would repel, they would push themselves apart. But this third force, this neutral force, allows the two to be there and not repel each other, thereby creating the entire universe around us. And you'll see in all stable atoms that there are as many neutrons as protons in the nucleus of the atom, no matter how big, how small, except for helium, hydrogen. It's been a long day, folks. We've been at this since 6 this morning or something. So if I turn into a blithering idiot, it's normal. Relax.
I'll just cart him away and see if I can piece things together. Yes.
Yeah. So think about this for a second. The universe is arranged in such a way that you can have like charges hanging out together and balanced so that they don't go splitting apart by these other little particles. So that, for me, was one of the first understandings of how the 3 forces work together in the universe. The second understanding came from doing martial arts, of all things. Now, most martial arts are binary, but I had, and Todd is going to help me out here again because he's one of my old training partners back in the day. We used to spend lots and lots of time in our guru's garage getting thrown about furiously. And in that particular art, which is a form of pencak silat, which comes from Indonesia, they made use of the 3 forces. So you didn't just have moving towards somebody or moving away from somebody. You had this extra little way of moving. I always thought of it as moving against. So moving towards something, right? Like punching something, moving away from something. So the punch comes and you slip it. And moving against something where you wedge it in a certain way. So it goes off and you have the contact, but you also have the avoidance happening at the same time. Learning that physically was a major revelation for me.
The other part was that once in a great while, you'd stumble on absorbing the force in a way that it powered whatever, that you could store it and absorb it for whatever you wanted to do next.
Yeah, Guru almost broke my wrist that way once, where he had me punch him and he just kind of pulled it in and flipped it back. Painful lesson.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was like punching the Pillsbury Doughboy. So this can be understood on a number of levels. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff used to assert that humanity is by and large third force blind. We don't see the third force. We don't relate to the third force. And that seems pretty true to me. You have Aristotle. Aristotle has dominated Western thought for 2,500 years or whatever it's been, and we're just now breaking away from him. And his entire philosophy was built on polarity, on yin and yang, on true and false. His logic is two-valued. A thing is either true or it's false. There's nothing in between those two. And that works to a certain extent. It's great for certain things. You can win a lot of arguments with that, but doesn't mean that it's true in the greater universe. We're just now getting away from that in, say, computer science, where indeterminate is also a state. It used to be a switch was either on or off, a 1 or a 0.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have in quantum computing a 1, a 0, and a superposition. And that we could say is also an example of the third force at work. This, by the way, is all metaphor. Absolutely all metaphor, as is most of our understanding of the universe. But it doesn't mean that it's not useful. So, how do we learn to see the third force? Seriously.
The only way I've ever done it has been by direct experience, and on the very best days being able to hold on to that until the next direct experience.
Yeah, and that's probably the best answer, is you have to learn to experience this. For me, I feel it in my body a lot. It is a matter of sensation rather than of cognition, where the sensation informs the cognition.
Yeah, Thorn has a
What-
thought. Yeah.
What first brought this concept from theory into practice was also physical for me. I was sitting at lunch in my Gurdjieff group at the time, and I had a back injury, and someone was trying to hand me a full pitcher of water to pass to the person next to me. And I really wanted to pass the pitcher of water. And I also knew I really could not do this motion with a full pitcher of water. And so I was stuck literally in between two people, one who wanted to pass me a pitcher and one who wanted the pitcher. And I knew I couldn't do it. I knew I wanted to do it. And I just had to sit there with those two forces. And I saw myself suddenly and burst into tears. Right. And it wasn't, they weren't tears of pity. It was just, so powerful, that experience, to feel the two forces and just have to be with them. And that helped me then take that knowledge into like my sitting meditation, right? If I was struggling with two things in my life, I would sit with them both. And as a magic worker, it's been helpful for me then to think of, in Tarot, the high priestess who mediates between the two pillars, or the charioteer who has to be in full alignment, or the black horse and the white horse will move in two different directions, right? If the charioteer doesn't have access to that third force, the chariot either goes off the rails or remains still. So again, it was a physical experience. It was an experience in my body that helped me with the theory.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And that burst of emotion often happens when you find yourself stuck between a binary and you can't create a resolution.
Yeah, and as Thorn said in the chat earlier, you have thesis, you have the antithesis, and then you have the synthesis.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
from
Hegel.
Hegelian dialectic phenomenology or philosophy. And that basically says that for every thesis, there's an antithesis, antithesis. For every yes, there's a no. And if you are smart enough, you will realize that there is truth and there is falsehood in both the thesis and the antithesis. And you can extract the truth from both and create a higher order synthesis, which then again creates its own antithesis. And that can continue to go on forever until you reach the ultimate truth of the universe.
Whatever that is.
Well, that's when the duck comes down and gives you $200.
We'll wait patiently for that.
Am I sort of reaching a bit too much if I suggest that wave particle duality in quantum mechanics is somehow related to that?
I wouldn't think so. I would think that you're right in line with everything else we've been talking about. What do you think the reconciling forces between the wave particle duality?
Well, the duality is sort of resolved by observation.
Yes.
Observation.
The observer to have
slightly more precise measurement.
Yeah.
Not
just having a precise measurement, but having somebody staring at that precise measurement.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, it's a lot more complicated than that when you dig into it.
Yeah, but that's the fundamental basis of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the quantum state collapses when it's observed. And in order to have something observed, there must be an observer, by definition.
Who is acting as a third force.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the resolution of that duality was the insight that there are certain things that are quantized and can only exist in certain discrete states, rather than one of these discrete states, rather than certain mathematical abstractions of particle or wave that had been imposed on them by a less complete understanding. And then the math, and then the math began.
Yeah, the math. Once I got into the math, I realized that I was lost. I don't care that much to know that much math that closely to actually know if I'm getting the equations, reading the equations correctly.
But it was one of the great advances in understanding of the last couple hundred years.
Yes.
Yeah, and Thorn is, as a matter of fact, it is of use.
I'll read it.
I just watched that like yesterday, and I loved it. And what we will do is I will connect your video. Nord, tell them what Thorn says.
Yes, Thorn offers up, if it is of use, which we have confirmed, it definitely very well could be for many of us. Thorn just posted a brief meditation on their YouTube channel about walking the blade, as a way to assess choices. One portion is to stand at the point where the yes and no meet.
Yes.
Thank you. I have not seen it, but I look forward to checking it out.
Yeah, I don't even know if I told you that it was up there. We've been so
No,
busy.
not yet. Yeah.
But if you look at the end of this video, up in the right or left-hand corner, you will see a link to the video that we are referring to. So there, we may even put a
Yeah.
link in the description.
I'd say put
I'm
it
not
in
too
the
lazy.
description. Yeah.
Yeah,
Making a note.
make a note. So forget that.
Yeah, I'd like to come back briefly to the mathematics involved. It's not that different from the way that there are harmonics on strings.
Yeah,
Basically, the sorts of differential equations involved have what's called a spectrum of solutions, and it's the spectra that determine what are the valid quantum states involved that are allowed.
yeah. And for me, that is easier for me to comprehend this stuff in music than it is in pure mathematics, because I tend to think that way. And Thorne points out that Pythagorean harmonics play two notes at once and a third appears. It's true. It's weird. But for those of us who are lazy, I boil it down to, and the universe contains a maybe. Which I wish I invented myself, but I actually got from Bob Wilson.
Good old Bob.
Good old Bob. Crazy Bob.
Robert Anton Wilson.
Yep. Yeah, so how do you find the third force? And once you find it, what do you do with it? This is the important question. Well, I can give you one hit. Noor and I went over some material yesterday that was incredibly complex on how octaves fit on enneagrams using the three forces. And it's way more elaborate than I ever want to have to try and teach somebody. But it basically says that when you get to spinning around octaves, how can I boil this down into a couple of sentences? The reconciling force creates the shock points. The shock points are those intervals in the octave where the vibration is retarded. So in a standard Pythagorean octave, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, it would be between the mi, fa, and the si, do intervals. If you look at a piano, it's the place between where there is no black keys between the white keys. And the third force is what helps resolve the octave through those steps. That doesn't make much sense. So think of it this way. Think of a yes or a no in your life. Think of a no. Let's make it even simpler. Think of a no in your life. Now, what is the yes? You don't have to tell me. Just think of it. What is the yes that matches that no? When you have that, ask yourself, what would it take to resolve the conflict between the yes and the no? That's the basic way you work with this. So you're dealing with something in your life. Determine whether it's a yes or a no. Then find the opposite of it. Then ask yourself, what is the higher order resolution of that?
I wonder if we could think of an example that's relatable.
In
This-
Thor's example, they ended up with a yes and a no.
Yeah.
They really wanted to pass the water and they couldn't. They literally couldn't pass the water. One higher order resolution would be to push your chair back, stand up, and make a space for the one person to pass the water to the other. Or you stand up, walk to the one person, depending on how the back is, grab the pitcher in a way that it is possible to carry and carry it over to the second person. Because the problem, it sounds like it was in the arrangement where doing this would suck big time and probably end up with a pitcher dumped in your lap, none of which would have been fun.
So it involves, in a way, as you said, in a sense, taking a higher view of the situation.
Yes.
Sometimes literally stepping back and being able to embrace the whole scene and figure out where to go from there.
Yes, and stepping back is a major thing to do.
Whether that's literally or figuratively.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as you were talking about reconciling the yes and no, sometimes in common culture and what I call the overculture, we say, oh, well, it's not black or white, it's gray. And that's not what we're talking about.
No.
It's not black. We have black, we have white, and then we have maybe a rainbow.
Yes.
Right. The third force is not a blend. It's something new. Right. And in our discourse, contemporary discourse, we like to think in shades of black, white, or gray. And the two of you are helping to bust us out of that sort of thinking.
Inshallah.
Because gray is not helpful.
No. And the truth of the matter is black and white, neither are colors. Black is the absence of light. Color is the reflection of all light. In between those is the entirety of the spectrum.
So it's a great
Yeah, it's a
metaphor,
perfect
actually.
metaphor
Yeah.
for what we're talking about.
Thanks, Thorn. James has been,
Todd also has something, but yes, let's get to James.
and then
Waiting
Ian,
patiently.
then Todd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to see if what I'm about to say is the same thing, or if I've been fooled by superficial resemblance. In a therapeutic situations, particularly couples therapy, you have two people and they're trying to embody and live a certain value, the value of the intimacy and the relationship, but their stories clash on how it has to be and how they each have to be treated. And this often leads to a degradation of the value of the relationship. But if they can find some way of stepping back, getting back in contact with the driving value, not being so locked into the stories, they can recreate a new mutual story and attain a deeper integration or appreciation or demonstration of the values. See, that sounds to me, in that particular context, of a similar process. You have two conflicting forces, in this case, overly solidified stories, which at one point served the values behind, but are no longer doing so. The clash is preventing that. So if they're going to recontact that value and in fact amplify it into something new, they have to step back from the stories and find different modes of relationship.
I think that works quite well. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That is
that's a perfect example. That even relates to what we were talking about in our last talk. Because speaking as somebody who did a lot of couples counseling when I was working professionally, if I ran across that situation, I would create a third story, one that reconciled the values to a story that would incorporate both of those other stories. And I would give it to the people in such a way that they could accept it. And hopefully that would resolve the conflict. Create
And
a higher order.
yeah, create opportunity for more expansiveness than would be possible being trapped in either of those stories. Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you, Thorn. Ian? What else do we have?
Yeah, I was just reminded of an experience I had about 6 months before I became involuntarily retired. I got asked to help essentially mediate a project that had been stuck. It was across different groups in the company, and these guys had been stuck for quite a while. And I don't know why they picked me. What I found is that I was within one session, I was able to get them all on the same page and moving forward. And the way that I managed to do this is that several years before, I'd been part of a team that was trying to set up a knowledge management in the company. And one of the people who was one of the co-leaders of the team was a very, very experienced consultant. And I learned a lot from him in many ways, but one of the things was that I gradually absorbed some of the techniques he used in order to get people moving. For example, one of them was he would restate what somebody said, but in slightly different terms. And I found myself using this. I haven't really sort of used it in the intervening years, but it started just happening. And I found that the real key was to focus on the fact that we ultimately had a shared goal, which was to get things moving forward. And for me, I had sort of a modest bias in terms of where exactly I thought it should go, but it wasn't a strong bias. So I was able to hear everybody and kind of evaluate where all the parties were relative to the shared goal. And really, there was just one, maybe two people who were kind of coming from a place where if their view prevailed, we would just never be able to get to that goal. And somehow I was able to make them see that. And we ended up, basically they got unstuck within one session, which kind of amazed me and almost everybody else. But it just struck me as an example of where I've really seen that principle in action.
Excellent. Yeah, facilitating, advocating for activating that third force. Yeah. Very cool. So, such good examples about how this stuff plays out in practical life. Todd has a thought, and then Levita.
Yes.
I
And then we
was
have to say hello to Dr. Bill.
Yeah.
I was reading some early 20th century, a couple of early 20th century British occultists, which is definitely an experience. And they, well, and I joined, my gosh, they all seem to be so set on either being very, very good or very, very evil. And out of the dim past, I just remember Tennyson's Thomas the Rhymer, the poem Thomas the Rhymer. And oh, see ye not yon narrow road, so thick beset with thorns and briars, that is the path of righteousness, though after it but few inquires. And see ye not that braid, braid road that lies across the Leven, that is the path of wickedness, though some call it road to heaven. And see not the bonny road that winds around the ferny brae, that is the road to fair Elfland, where thou and I, this night, maun gae. Was
Yeah, that's a really good example in poetry of the third force.
What was it? I want to make sure people can go read it.
it's called
Tennyson.
Tennyson. Yeah,
Thomas the Rhymer.
yeah,
Okay.
classic poem.
Yeah, I don't know the poem, but Steel Eye Span, which was a classic British folk group, did a great version of it.
They pretty much copied it direct, if I remember.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and it is based, as Thorne points out, on an old Scottish ballad.
Hmm.
Yeah, very, very old. And it was also, I found myself going, okay, according to your way of looking at the world, it has to be this one or that. Well, it was, I had also been talking to an author who had a very good book, but he had this idea. He's very, very good writer, very intelligent, but he had recently become Catholic and had everything had to be neatly divided into divine or infernal.
Hmm.
And I said, well, what about fire? What about, because this is what I do these days, what about a hammer? Can you neatly divide those into divine or infernal? Where does intention and where does it could serve so many goods, so many ends, good, bad, or neither, or both at the same time. And it was very difficult to get through to a very intelligent and otherwise intellectually flexible person that there had to be some third way, at least third way, and probably many, many more ways, more or less useful, to look at the same phenomenon without having to, hold on to this this philosophical presupposition about what it had to be.
Hmm.
Yeah. Back when I was practicing, one of the ways I knew that my clients were getting through a particular problem was when they could come up with 3 viable choices. Not one choice, not 2 choices, but at least 3. Once they could do that, I knew that they were going to be okay. And that's because 3 choices, and this goes to the law of 3. Having 3 choices is what a human being does. Having one choice is to have no choice. Having 2 choices is to be stuck in the yes or the no. It's robotic. Having 3 choices gives you some wiggle room. And then eventually you get to having infinite choices.
And the other one that comes to mind is if I worship thee for fear of hellfire, may the fires of hell be put out. If I worship thee out of or may be cast into hellfire. If I worship thee out of hope of heaven, may the gates of paradise be closed. But if I worship you for yourself alone, may I not be denied the beauty of your presence.
Yes, that was Rabia.
Saint
Yeah.
Rabia. Yes.
We like Rabia.
Yeah. Feel a little sorry for the town guards of Basra who had to gently sort of gently disabuse her from, yeah, please put the torch down.
Hmm. Thanks, Todd. We'll make sure
Yep.
that we mention those in the description.
And Dr.
Lavita,
Bill has put in the
a
chat
link.
link to Thomas the Rhymer, which
Ah.
everybody should know anyway.
Yep. Very helpful. Thank you, Dr. Bill.
And Levita had a question, right?
Yep.
I did, but I don't think it's relevant anymore.
Damn it.
So,
Hate it when that happens.
yeah.
Are you sure you don't want to share? It might be relevant. No pressure.
I was thinking of what Thorn said about black and white, and then in the middle there's color.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it could be a rainbow, it could be a color. And then what came to me was basically that's your third force, because if you say the observer changes the outcome, that's what the color is. It's based on the observer.
Aha.
Depending on the observer, it could be a rainbow or it could be anything in between.
Yeah.
Infinite possibilities, right?
Yeah.
That's what we are trying to open ourselves up to.
So there's a method of asking questions, which is usually known as spiritual inquiry, which is basically you hold the question and you be still until an answer emerges. And the question at all times can be, what is the third force in this situation? Thorn, yes.
For me, what's helpful about that is that what our tendency to do is we want to fall one direction or the other. We want to be subsumed in hatred, or we want to be subsumed in love, right? Or the yes or the no. And listening, observing, requires us to center ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're not moving willy-nilly, which literally means with will or without will, right? So if I center myself enough to listen, then I'm actually able to perceive the two forces more clearly, which gives me more information, which then helps me ask the question again, what's the third force?
Yeah. And we see that one of the greatest examples of being stuck in the binary right now is, of course, what's going on in the Middle East. Because if you're pro-Israeli, then Palestinians are by definition animals. And if you are pro-Palestinian, by definition, the Israelis are animals. And the truth is not found in either of those polarities. And we need to find the reconciling force there.
Desperately.
Desperately, which basically boils down to just us folks. It's interesting because I was listening to a Ladino song this afternoon after our first talk. Ladino is the language of the Sephardic Jews who came out of southern Spain and northern Africa, and it's related to Spanish, just like Yiddish is related to Polish and German. And there's enough Spanish in it that I can make out what the lyrics are. And part of the lyrics, this was written in about 1935. And the refrain from it was, let's flee to Palestine and escape all these horrors. And I heard that and I was like, wow. There was a time where going to Palestine, even though it was at that point, it was, well, 35, it was no longer controlled by the Ottoman Empire, but it was still controlled by Muslim countries, Jordan especially, and thereabouts. There was no state of Israel at the time, and yet people felt okay to go there. They felt that that was safety rather than staying where they were in a Europe that was being overrun by Nazis.
It was that there were many pogroms in Palestine at the time, but it was still it was the safety was only relative.
Yeah, well, relative to Nazis, still seems pretty safe.
Yeah,
Thorn says it wasn't under British rule at that time.
It might
Yeah, I
have
think
been
it
as a
was.
British protectorate. I forget how World War One divvied everything up.
the British mandate when the Ottoman Empire fell apart. It was kind of rock, paper, scissors among the Allies as to who was going to be stuck with administering.
Yeah, France, the UK.
And it was one of those things where nobody wanted to.
Oh yeah, America didn't want to have anything to do with it. So that was the last time we were smart about the Middle East.
Yeah, but it was sort of the fallout of the end of hundreds of years of an order, and
Yeah.
it was,
Dr. says 1920 to 1948, the British Mandate.
yeah.
Great, thank you. I thought so too.
I don't think the Kingdom of Transjordania even existed back then.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, they balkanized the whole place right after World War One. It was hard to keep track of who was what and where for me because I just never paid that much attention to it, not having to live through it.
Yeah.
Yes, Todd?
No, nothing.
All right, I thought maybe we would check in with Lita, who has her hand
Yes.
up.
So the third force that you mentioned, Mushtaq,
Yes.
I'm assuming that the third force is either helping to resolve or dissolve the situations between the two polar opposites.
Yeah, to reconcile the situations, literally.
Right. So, basically, what's coming up for me is basically that's where those shades of gray are, meaning it's kind of messing in the middle, and it's almost like how in astronomy they're able to determine, oh, this planet has satellites, but we can't see them from here. But that's because we can see the effect that other satellite is having on the other planets or celestial bodies, if that makes any sense. My astronomy is
Inference, yeah. Yeah, finding ways to uncover what's there, even if we can't see it directly through signs and the impact of these things. Yeah. That's the thing too, right? If we are not centering ourselves and listening and observing and all of that stuff, we miss those details. We miss those signs that there is something more present.
That reminds me of something we were talking about earlier today, where it's like somebody's telling you something and you know the situation just isn't right, even though according to what they're telling you, it should be. And you're like, something's missing. You don't know what it is or what it looks like. You just know something, somewhere in there, there's something that's not, it's either there that's not supposed to be or is not there and it should be. Is that something similar?
That's something identical. Yeah. And so this gets us back to the idea that you can train yourself to experience the third force in all things. And when you have all three forces pinned down, then you are able to exert influence on the situation more effectively. How can this be? I could be full of shit about this, folks. So think about it. How could this be? I've been known to be full of shit. Todd will tell you. Todd and I have known each other for a number of years, and he's seen me full of shit at least once, maybe twice.
Could you
James and Todd. Todd, you first.
I was
'cause-
just asking if you could restate what you said.
No, no.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. James.
In terms of third force and what you can exert on the situation, and this is me automatically coming back into my own language. With the appreciation of the third force, would you not be able to see options out of a situation that's not evident to other people?
Exactly. Yes. One of the most valuable things about this is that you can find options out of a situation that are not evident to other people.
If they are
Mm.
not paying, tuning into that third force. And
Mm.
sometimes we're lucky enough to be in a situation where you have more folks attuned to that. But at this juncture, it's not commonplace, is it?
No.
Dr. Bill.
Yeah. I confess that I've not run into this tool to think with until tonight's meeting. But it seems to me not surprising that people are blind to it because they're happy where they are. They're happy. I'm on the right side of blank, even if the right side is the wicked side. They still think that they're on the best side to be at the time. And the third force seems almost to me to be the escape hatch. What am I missing? What am I missing? I mean, that seems to me a fundamental way to frame the issue. Here we are in opposition. Here we are in polar opposites. What am I missing?
Yeah. You can think of this in terms of a parry, a void, or a stop thrust.
Oh, swords.
Words.
No.
What would motivate people to ask
No,
that question
no,
of themselves?
In this case, I'm going to say no. Because a parry is oppositional.
Yes.
A stop thrust is offensive.
Yes.
What you're looking for is Aikido.
That's the void.
Ah, so you're using void differently than Italianate void.
Nobody speaks Italian around here. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I'm the German sword geek, but by definition, since Fiore is the other big name on the table, I got to speak Italianate rapier too. And then I go have some whiskey and I feel better.
There you go. Voiding as the sense of removing yourself from the situation so it goes past you. Yes.
Blending and redirecting.
Yep.
Now that I think we can all understand. Yeah. Something comes at you, you take that force in and you direct it elsewhere.
Yeah, so a parry is the denying force. The stop thrust is the affirming force, thwack. And the void is the reconciling force, from which you can do either, both, or neither.
And again, you using the schema I've been playing with, just because we all get attached to things we think of, right? It is literally the way out.
Yes.
To void in that fashion is literally to leave the immediate opposition. And now you got a chance to think, now what?
Yep.
Thorn, yeah.
Two things come to mind. First of all, metaphysically, I love this conversation because metaphysically, the void is the precursor to everything.
Yes.
Right. It's the fount of everything, right? The great zero, the great cosmic egg. So I love this conversation. Second of all, I'm thinking of one of my favorite teaching movies, Red Belt. Has anyone seen Red Belt?
I've seen it. Yeah.
I have not. I'm making
It's a brilliant teaching film. I highly recommend it if you can find it streaming somewhere. There's a point near the end where he is in an impossible situation. He's literally between a person and a wall, right? Two forces, and he has to find a way out. And he drops into his center. You see him do it, and I won't spoil it, but he finds a way out that's just mind-blowing and beautiful. It's a great illustration of this.
Yeah. God, I haven't thought of that movie in quite a while.
I used to
Perhaps we'll
recommend it
check
to
it
my
out.
students. I recommended it to my students all the time. It's terrific.
Something to think about this week.
Yes.
Putting it in the back of my mind.
It's
Thanks, Thor.
it's on the Amazon streaming service and a couple
Oh,
of
sweet.
Nice.
There was another example that occurred to me, which is United Nations Peacekeeping Forces. Because potentially one of the ways to resolve the Israel-Hamas conflict, and I'll say specifically Israel-Hamas rather than Israel-Palestine, would be a UN peacekeeping force if either of the parties could agree to it. And part of the problem is that Netanyahu isn't interested and doesn't seem that there's any sign that Hamas is going to be interested in that either.
And as you know, Thorn points out, there are issues with the peacekeeping force themselves and whether, those are the folks that are an ideal party to be put in that position.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody would want to see either Russia or Iran be put in there as a peacekeeping force.
Yep.
or Nigeria.
Or Nigeria, yeah.
Yep. This is going to, problems like this require a lot of creative solution finding, and so far I don't think that we have had our figures in power put in or even be motivated to put in the kind of work it would be necessary to utilize to create the kinds of, to produce the kinds of solutions that might work. James.
Just going back to what Dr. Bill was saying a bit earlier, thinking of when you have two polar opposite positions and you're identified with one. apparently regardless of the outcome, because you're right, you're righteous, and it defends you, it boosts you in some way. How do you motivate someone to look at the other position? How do you to even consider it, let alone step beyond positions into a third force? How do you inspire someone to do that?
Well, at some level, it comes down to them being in a situation where it becomes more advantageous for them to move their position than to stay in the stuck state. I'm thinking perhaps about the Russia-Ukraine situation. Given the kind of stalemate that they're in right now, there's not enough motivation for either side to move. And in a sense, if Ukraine were to get enough weaponry from the West to get Russia on the run, then it might motivate the Russians to come to the negotiating table, whereas right now they're just not motivated. Putin is just adamant.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it might also motivate the Ukrainians to get a little revenge and kill every Russian they could get their hands on,
Mm,
because
Perhaps,
that's
yeah.
what happens.
yep. Ultimately, I am on
Yeah,
board with
so
what
we
Thorn is saying.
yeah, we start small.
And Thorn
Yes.
says we must begin with our own lives, ourselves. Gurdjieff said that we need critical mass to become food for the sun, as they say.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, and that's the upshot of this. Start small. Learn to perceive the third force in your life. Always look for the third choice. Find the yes, find the no, find the maybe, find the or this. But if you're stuck in the binary, you are going to be forever butting heads or crushing your opponent or having your opponent crush you.
Yep. And we all know how easy it is to spit advice at other people, right? Like, oh, you're missing this. Why don't you do things differently? Remember that and look inward.
Yeah. So, third choices. There's a fun but silly movie called Roadhouse. And in it, this is about bouncers in a nightclub. And in it, some guys jump bad at the head bouncer. And it's like, I could fight you. And I can take you and all of this. And the head bouncer says, okay, take it outside. And so the guys go stomping outside and the bouncers follow them, stop at the door. And when they're all outside standing at the bottom of the steps, the bouncer just waves at them, closes the door and locks it. That's a good use of the third force.
There was a
Yes.
real life example with the late and lamented Cliff Stewart, where he was bodyguarding a famous person. They and a few people in the restaurant wanted to fight him, fight his client. So Cliff told them, "Tell you what, guys, go out back, or go out in the parking lot. We'll be there in a second. Warm up, do whatever you have to." They ran through the kitchen to the back to the car after calling the police, and then took off just as the police showed up.
Yeah, and that's a great example. Cliff was, we used to refer to Cliff as the mountain that walks. It would not have been happy with the outcome of the binary in that one.
I think they were better off. I think they were better off the police.
With the
Yeah.
cops. Yeah.
So,
Thorn, yeah.
yeah, Thorn, please.
One thing I want to point out, I go to global situations all the time too, because
Yeah.
it's heart-wrenching, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I want to remind us of is the more we can start to do this work in our own lives, the more trustworthy we become to other people.
Mhm.
The people around us pick up on it. And the more people find us to be trustworthy, the more we start to build those sorts of relationships, and the more this work ripples out, right? Because then we're attracting more people who want to not be in constant states of polarity. It doesn't even matter if we talk about it, right? Doing this work makes us more trustworthy to those around us, except for bad actors. They don't like us, and that's okay, right? So it's a way to start to build on this work, that it doesn't stay isolated. So that for me is a point of hope.
For me too, Thorn. For me too. Yeah, I could not agree more. Which is why it's so important that we take this work personally and are not always projecting that this work needs to be done onto others. It has to start with ourselves. And there are no excuses to be made for that. It has to start with us. It has to start with, shall we say, me, not just us as, the hive mind, but as individuals.
Yeah, I kind of want to come back to somewhere where I'm currently stuck. I know that I don't want to be kind of in this particular place, but for the last several years, I've been learning how to trade options. Not very successfully, unfortunately. And in order to do that, I've been spending, I basically spend most of my day on watching CNBC so that I stay very, very, very well informed. And the problem I'm facing is that I could just drop it all, but then I would not have any obviously viable way of potentially making money if I actually got good enough to make money out of trading. And it strikes me that I probably, on the basis of what we've been talking about tonight, it strikes me that perhaps I need to try and figure out if there's a reasonable third path beyond staying with what I'm doing or just dropping it entirely. It's something I thought about, but I haven't been able to come up with any useful solution. But perhaps that's something I should put more focus on.
Well, let me encourage you to that, because if you're stuck in that binary, you almost undoubtedly lose money. And Nor can tell you, I'm pretty good at trading stocks. And for a while, a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of trading and making a little money.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked at the market and my intuition said, get your ass out. And so I pulled back just about everything I had invested in stocks, and just kept a couple that I'm pretty sure over a long period of time will net us a substantial return, but it's like a very long-term investment. And then I found a place, in this case, it was a very high yield
Money
savings account.
market, mutual fund,
Um,
savings
high
account.
savings. It's just high yield savings with, of all places, American Express.
Hmm.
They're doing an almost 5% if you're well.
Yeah,
This
I'm getting that in most of my account. I was smart enough to, I guess it was around the start of 22, I went to almost all cash. And I'm still mostly all cash. But the markets have just been very difficult to trade either stocks or options over the
Yeah.
last couple of years.
Yeah, I got out in the nick of time because like 2 days after I got out, everything went to shit.
Hmm.
So for this kind of issue, you know how we were talking about Thorn's blade meditation earlier?
Yes.
Thorn offers that this would be an excellent thing to apply this practice to, this, binary.
Absolutely. And while I'm thinking of it, for everybody who's here, we will just drop this right in the chat. This will be up with the video and everything, but you might as well get it now. Avoid the rush. There will be thousands of people wanting to watch this video by this time tomorrow. So watch it as soon as we're done here. And I'm happy to say I was the first person who gave you a like on that video.
Hello. Today I want to talk about honoring commitments.
There
and
we go.
Yeah,
Just
that's the one.
yeah.
Too often.
Excellent. Sharing the wealth. There
Yes,
we go.
I will definitely be watching that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
In our lives and in the lives of our communities.
Whoever's listening to that,
ourselves
mute
or
your mic,
others,
because as much as
taking on commitments or making
Yeah.
choices.
Make
We'll
it
just
stop.
Save it for later. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Dr. Bill, did you have a thought?
Only that I was going to beseech Mushtaq and you to speak kindly of my ability with a sharp thing or 6 or 20 or many, many,
oh
many
yes,
to Thorn, whom doesn't know me from a hole in the ground.
yeah. Somebody, when I was a young feller, one of my old folks said to me, "Son, whatever you do, don't get into a knife fight with the doctor. They know just where to stick you."
Yep.
Yes, Dr. Bill is arguably in his time one of the finest emergency room physicians, at least on the East Coast, maybe anywhere, and is a master of defense, which means he holds a very, very high rank in fighting with steel weapons without armor, usually, amongst various people. He's highly respected, usually invited to all of the biggest goings-on like the WMAW, and knows what he's talking about when it comes to swords, knives, great swords.
Saber and Fokosh this
Yeah.
September.
Yes.
So when he hears anything about blades, he's bound to be enticed. Yep.
Do you ever make it out to Sword Squatch?
I have not made it out to Sword Squatch in the past. I know that Devin and Kimberly would absolutely love me to get my ass out to Sword Squatch sometime. but there are only so many days, and unfortunately, they don't pay me for days off. Which, considering I make what I make, I have no right to complain. So I'm not going.
Future possibilities. One day, perhaps. All right, who have we not heard from this evening? A few
Lots of
you.
people.
Yes.
We have a silent
Alka,
round.
what's on your mind this talk around the third force and perhaps its applications?
I was using it for my current situation when we were going through this exercise of how do you find the third force, and if you find it, what you do with it. So I took a situation of my neighbors over here. I'm new to my neighborhood, and my neighborhood wants to become friends with me, and I'm avoiding it. And I was wondering, like I took that as an example as to why don't I want to be friends with them? I mean, they seem to be nice people, but somehow I feel something is not right about it. And I'm almost blaming, I don't like those people. They are very, one-sided thinking kind of a thing. They're not open-minded. It's all my drama. It's my entertainment. So I took that as an example. And when yes or no situation, so I took that as a no situation. And what would I do if I allowed them to come in my life? And I realized it was, in order for me to do that, I have to be a better person, like better than what I am today. So this was something about me that was not a better person, which was a very interesting exercise for me. And here I thought I'm a better person. That's right.
And now you are.
Yeah, well, thank you. For me, it was a very interesting insight. This third force was that I have to center myself, and I'm not making time for it, for my own centering myself. And another thing, it's like I'm asking myself a question, what am I avoiding? And I'm avoiding time for myself. That's what I'm avoiding. I'm getting too much into taking care of the house, other things, but I'm avoiding that time for myself. And then I'm using this as an excuse that other people are not good. So it was very interesting exercise for me to find this third force. I love it. So thank you.
And that's interesting because in all probability, Gurdjieff learned about the third force in India. Because you guys are steeped in the third force there.
Yes, I was actually thinking, thank you for giving that opportunity. I was thinking that we were always into this.
Yeah.
Somehow this just got lost in the last 200 years.
Yeah.
But we were always thinking of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, right? Always the third force. Always do a prayer before you start something good or bad, right? Which could be a war.
Even in Ayurvedic medicine.
Okay.
Think about Trifela, Traikatu, all of these preparations, these that are rasayanas that are built out of 3 specific herbs that balance all 3 forces. And of course, this is also the gunas.
Yes. Yeah, 3 gunas. Yeah.
So I am almost positive that Gurdjieff learned about the 3 forces in his travels in India.
Well, there you go.
I'm telling you, after coming back to India, after living in US for 35 years and coming back over here, I feel it is amazing what this country has to offer to the world. But in order for everything to become same, we are trying to be more American over here. I mean, American in the sense Western, I should better not call American. And we are losing that. We are really thinking only negative or positive.
Hey, if you
Hindu
want to
or
be
Muslim.
really like Americans, we'll send you Trump.
Oh my God.
We
I
have
think
our
they're
own.
having a hard enough time. Yeah, I think they
Yeah,
have
and
their
Yes.
own.
I like India too much to do that to them.
No,
But
we will
yes.
fix our own problems.
Yes. So in short, this was a beautiful exercise. And I just have one question, maybe. So nowadays, for the past 1 year, I've been going through a lot of body aches. And I was able to get into it during my meditation, and I realized it was all emotional and not physical body aches. And I was able to get it out. But now I am going through everything very slowly. And I realize that all my walks, so it's not like I have to walk fast or slow, but I have to be aware of everything. Is that the
That's a
third
good thing.
force I'm becoming aware of?
It may be. It's a good thing though that if you're moving slow enough to be aware of what you're doing.
Yes.
I would take that as
So
a
I was just wondering, is that a third force example? Like you're not trying to go fast or slow,
yeah,
but you're becoming.
that could very well be, yes.
Wow. So this was amazing for me. I'm really looking forward to experiencing this third force more consciously.
Good.
Yay. That's excellent. Thank you, Aka. Shuri, how about you? You got any thoughts? Questions?
For Aka.
Admonishments?
Admonishments. Woo! I think the slow moving is like a reconciling with your body, because when we're moving too fast all the time, we have to disconnect to get whatever it is that is our focus done. So when we start slowing down and we start feeling, we are actually reconciling with our bodies, and we're actually noticing things about our bodies, and we're actually recognizing where the unnecessary tension is so that we can actually just breathe it out. And I think that's a fabulous thing. The older we get, the more possibility there is for actually experiencing that. When you're young, you're excited, you want bigger, faster, stronger, everything. But when you're getting older, you think, I was just doing the same thing on my walk today, and I just really enjoyed it. And I thought I was noticing different things about the outside, and I really like that. Today's talk was great. The Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine thing is just big family problem. You know, they're brothers, cousins. We look at our own families and you can see, okay, so if we're actually using the third force to reconcile within our own families, my situation is inheritance. So there are 3 siblings. One sibling has been given the lion's share. The 2 other siblings have been told to just accept it. And then after it all happened, it was like, what happened there? And so there was this great big bun fight, and the second sibling didn't like what had happened. The third sibling that had got everything is just trying to, like, well, you know, it was given to me, so what do we do? So I was thinking about it, how do we actually reconcile it? So over time, and it's ongoing, because from time to time we feel like we're at peace and other times we're not. And so I said, you know, the parents make the decision that they feel was right at the time, and then situations changed. And so when you're looking at your own personal yes, no, and looking for that maybe, and looking for that reconciling force, I had to go into what is the most loving thing? What is the most important thing? Was to preserve good relationship with both siblings and their children, and with the parents, and recognizing all your needs are met, all of them. You don't need more. You have everything you need. You've got air to breathe. You've got a roof over your head. You've got food in your tummy. You've got a hot shower. That's all you need. If all those things are being met, everything else is extraneous. It's just a distraction. And you just think, okay, so it just helps bring peace. So when I find I'm looking for the third force, I'm thinking, how do I want to feel in a most loving, peaceful, reconciling way to find what that solution is? Because I can see the big picture things, but how can I influence the big picture as only being a small example of a possible solution? That's all I have to say.
Real
Yeah.
life applications. It's not easy, but I mean, this is where the meat of life is, right? Thank you, Shuri. Yusuf K, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. Great talk. It feels like it's about being free and being awake. Because we are in some kind of trance state as we talk.
Talked about this morning.
Yeah. Either under yes or no. So, and we are holding it. So right or wrong. So, and to be free of this trance is to find this third force, third state. And I think it's not so easy, but when we know there is a third option, even if we can't see it, we can look forward to it. So we can search for it. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a perfect segue into the last thing that I need to talk about tonight.
Ah, yes. We do have one more person we haven't heard from, but if you
Let's
want
hear from them, and then I'll finish it off with a thought.
a thought. Tatang. Tatang? I want to make
Tatang,
sure, please
yeah.
correct me. I want to make sure that we pronounce it right.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So, personally, I work with schools and university, and I think in educational institutions, the binary thinking is prevalent here. So, for example, in something like observing the classroom, so most of my colleagues see, for example, the right or wrong, or the good or the bad behavior or answer of the students. So quite recently, I engaged them to see something like, for example, if the student has a wrong answer, so I engage them to think about using the for example, what makes these students do that the answer, and what hinder him to do the right one, for example. So I think the third force is important to be to be something for teachers is important for the for understanding the whole children. So yeah, I think recently I consider that this is perhaps one way out to help students and teachers to resolve their classroom practice, etc. So that's what come up in my mind.
And I think that's excellent. And that's a meaningful place to apply this as well. Thank you very much for sharing. Very cool. All right, Mushtaq, you wanted to share a thought about
the three forces, and this is the secret. I've saved this to the last because only people who have stuck it out with us get to hear this. So there are three states that we can look at. The first is sympathy. Sympathy is where you look at somebody and you go, oh man, that sucks. That's too bad. I'm sorry that happened to you. That is the denying force. You look at empathy. Empathy is, oh man, I can feel your pain. That's really terrible. When empathy happens, you have these things in your head called mirror neurons, and they will.
I got it. No, it's Tatan coming back in.
Yeah, they will feel with the person. And that's the affirming force. And then you have compassion. Compassion is the reconciling force, and that is not what people think it is. The Buddhists come closest, I think, to understanding what real compassion is, other than Sufis, of course. We got this one down. I can be terrible sometimes.
Okay, so we've got sympathy as the denying force. We've got
empathy
as the affirming force.
And we have to understand what compassion is, because compassion is completely non-judgmental, first of all. When you look at that person who is in a state of suffering, no matter what it is, they're a homeless dude on the street, they're blasted out of their mind on fentanyl, they're laying there, they haven't had a bath in 14 months. The flies stay away from them. And you have to be okay with that. You have to not make judgment on it. But while not making judgment, you have to connect with that person at a deeper level than empathy. Compassion is one of the hardest things in the world. And the practice of compassion is what allows you to live in the reconciling force, to have it active in your life constantly. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Some work better than others for some people. The thing that I always do is that being is always reflected back, no matter what. The dog that's snarling and barking at you has the same being in it as you do. And you can look at that dog. It's on a leash, so it can't get to you. And you can go, oh, you hurt. I'm sorry you hurt for whatever reason. You're either angry or you're afraid. I don't know. And you can connect with that animal in that way. If you do it correctly, you end up looking a lot like St. Francis, right? The alligators and the wildebeests come and lay next to you. And we're probably going to have to do an entire talk on compassion sometime in the very near future.
Yeah, I
because
was thinking this seems like a topic unto itself.
yeah, but this is the secret to it all. To develop real compassion in this sense of absolutely non-judgmental, completely detached without being dissociated, and completely connected at the same time. You notice how there's three things there? And when you can do that, you activate the third force within yourself.
Could you repeat those three things?
You need to be completely non-judgmental, completely detached without being dissociated. So with empathy, you can look at somebody and go, damn, I wish you were not in that situation. And with compassion, you look at the person and just go, you're in this situation. And that may seem uncaring, but it's not. Noor and I have a friend. His name is Zachary. He lives, he's not on the street, but he's a street hustler. He was born with a massive spinal deformation. His legs are completely useless, tiny little things. He's the one person I know who's shorter than Noor is by about 4 inches, I think. And we could agonize over the rough hand that he was dealt, but he himself has made the best of this, and it behooves us to allow him the dignity of his position and not judge that he should be changed in any way. Does that make sense? This is hard to describe, but, and Thorn, feel free to chime in on this, because I know you're somewhat expert on this.
When I used to work full time in a soup kitchen, and one thing I had to learn was that in order to respect people, sometimes that meant setting a boundary. Sometimes that meant kicking them out for the day, right? And to not do that was to disrespect them. And that was part of how I started to learn true compassion. And then because I was just accepting, you're in this situation, you need help, we have help to offer you, but to be in community, you also have to abide by community agreements, right? So that was one lesson. But I'm also thinking of a quote I love from Isan Dorsey, who was a Buddhist monk and drag queen of blessed memory.
Great combination.
Yeah. And Isan said, many Buddhist teachers have described compassion as the ability to react freely and accurately in any situation. Being nice or feeling sorry for someone may be called for, but so may being fierce and unyielding. When sweetness is applied indiscriminately, it is seen as idiot compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the freely and accurately speaks to what you're getting at here.
Yeah, that's actually really good and much closer to what I'm trying to describe.
Yeah.
Well, you're seeing people as real people, not just something you're, again, projecting a narrative onto about, or, you know, from yourself as well. Oh, I should be this way towards people, or I need to be this way towards this particular person because of their condition, quote unquote. They're a whole person. Their beingness is as fully formed as your own. And
that's respect.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
No NPCs.
Exactly.
There you go. Yes.
Yes. No non-playable characters. No.
So Mushtaq, you said Non-judgmental, detached. What was the third?
Mental, detached, and connected.
Yes, connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say both to yourself and to the other.
Yeah.
There's that centeredness that we were talking about earlier that comes into play here.
Yep, that's exactly right. And little do most people realize, and Thorn may not even remember, but the soup kitchen is where I met you the first time. But what you didn't know is that I spent about 20 minutes outside the soup kitchen watching you before my time to come in, because I didn't know who you were and I wanted to see how you acted in that environment. And it made me really like you.
Aw.
You never told me that.
No, I didn't want to make you feel embarrassed at the time. But now I can embarrass you.
Sure.
Yeah, because you were exhibiting to the people around you exactly what we're talking about. Plus, you had no ego about what you were doing. You were in there emptying trash, washing dishes, doing whatever. And for somebody who had the reputation as a great teacher that you do, that was impressive. There was nobody fanning you while you were doing it.
And then you made me learn to run barefoot in the park. So
Yes, which you did beautifully.
The humiliation was complete. So that opens up the door to further conversation.
Yes. And those of you who managed to stick around through all of this now know the secret that we were circling around this entire time. Sympathy, empathy, compassion.
that's really useful. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Now all I only have to do is get it right all the time.
We call it practice for a reason.
It's true.
I always say practice makes possible.
I like that. Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say for the night.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. It's not only nice to have our, I always say this, our familiar faces, but you know, the people who pop in here every once in a while.
Yeah, I've got like 3 old friends here. You can't beat that.
That's awesome. It means a lot.
Yeah, people don't realize, especially when you start getting to my age, having old friends that are still breathing is really important.
Amen. Yeah. Thumbs up from Dr. Bill. And Khalil, I want to give a shout out to him. He's driving, but he's been present with us as well.
Yeah. So we missed your input on this.
Yeah. But be safe.
Right. Yeah, write things in the forum tomorrow or something.
All right, so let's go Brady Bunch mode real quick.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Thanks for everything. And thanks for a great day, all of you who have been here with us all day long.
Yeah, all the really crazy ones.
Hardcore. All right, let's wave to each other and everyone watching on the replay.
And we'll catch you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.